Okay, it's taken the best part of 6 months, but we're right at the end of learning how to light. In this last little video, I want to give you a few tips for future learning, but also, of course, I want to take us right back to those 4 basic facets, which by now we should be able to recite by heart: direction, quality, quantity, and colour. So there we go. That's what light is and how you use it. Now, in some cases we've gone into quite specific details throughout this course, but predictably, I want to bring us right back to those 4 basic characteristics of light: direction, quality, quantity, and colour. We know what they do, we know how they interact with each other, and we know that no matter what happens, we can't escape them in our shots. The only really important question then is the light doing what I want it to do to create the image I want to create? If it isn't, what can you do about it? Can you move and change where you're shooting? Can you diffuse the light in some way? Can you change its colour perhaps? Knowing how those 4 facets work and how they interact, your knowledge of them allows you to make the right decisions to ensure your images will look fantastic. Let's have a final example of how those characteristics play out and interact with each other. Here's an image I shot of yoga teacher and fitness guru Kat hanging from some fluorescent tubes. Now this image looks quite simple, but of course we know we need to look quite closely. First off, I'm playing tricks on you. She's not actually hanging from those fluorescent tubes. That would of course be impossible. She's lying on her side and I'm on a gantry overhead shooting straight down onto her. Now ignore the red background on this shot, it's from later in the day, but it gives you an idea of how I shot it. So let's look at those 4 characteristics of light as regards this shot. Now direction. Light is obviously coming from the tubes themselves, but it's not the only light, as there are some highlights and shadows on her body that don't quite match up. This behind the scenes shot shows us that there are in fact a large parabolic umbrella at the top right corner of the shot, a gridded softbox top left, and another gridded softbox bottom left. So in fact we've got light coming from a total of 5 different directions, 2 fluorescent tubes and 3 flashlights. Now the quality. The light from the fluorescent tubes is very soft, but since they are below Kat in a sense, they are sort of almost beneath her body, I added these extra flashlights in. Now of course this ties in very closely to direction. If the only light was coming from those tubes, then the top of Kat, the right side of her body facing the camera, would be quite dark and shaded, and I don't want that. By the same token, I also don't want to simply flatten any and all of the shadows, as they help to show off her athletic figure. So I add soft light from the flashes, but I control where it's falling with grids on the softboxes and polyboard reflectors around the sides of the perspex with those black sides facing in. Now quantity. This is really crucial with a shot like this where I'm mixing different light sources. If I just lit Kat with the flow tubes, the exposure would be very long and there'd be a decent risk of Kat moving even though she's lying on her side, and I don't want motion blur in the picture. However, if I just lit her with the flashes, they would overpower the fluorescent tubes, which of course don't put out much power, and you wouldn't see the light from them, which would kind of defeat the entire object of her hanging from them. So I need to choose an exposure and set the power of the flashes carefully to ensure that I can get the best of both. This is one of those times when of course having a huge amount of power variation in your flashes is very handy. Now of course I also want to keep my ISO nice and low so my image is of a very high quality and there isn't much noise in the picture. I ended up with quite a slow shutter speed of 1/30th of a second at f5 at ISO 100. Now lastly, colour. Now this is interesting, as although these are fluorescent tubes, which traditionally are a funny colour balance, much lower down the Kelvin scale, they're actually expensive film industry ones which are daylight balanced. So if I'm set for daylight on the camera, they'll come out neutral. The top one in the shot though actually has a blue translucent sleeve on it to change its hue. Now the flash is pretty close to daylight white balance, and since I'm going with a very cool look, I'm happy to set the camera to daylight white balance, which means the areas lit by the flash are neutral, and where the light from the blue sleeved flow tube shows up, it goes quite cool and blue. More than happy with that because it suits the mood of the shot. Now, that wasn't just yet another example and an exercise in reverse engineering, although frankly, you should take any chance you can to do reverse engineering. What I wanted to stress was that no matter how simple or complex your shot, those 4 characteristics always play a part and always interact with each other. In some cases, 1, maybe even 2 of those characteristics will be very, very simple and things will be easy for you. Great, happy days. In other situations, however, you're going to find that the way they interact and the result you're trying to get in the situation you're in can be quite complex. And as you pull in one area, you are forced to push in another and find yourself in almost painted into a corner. But of course, understanding how they work and how they interact means that you can make choices. You go into the situation well informed rather than getting unpleasant surprises. Once you grasp how they all work together, you can effectively solve any lighting problem out there. Now, granted, from time to time in certain circumstances, you might need more light, more equipment, diffusers, reflectors, whatever that might be. But of course, with the understanding of how those 4 characteristics work, you'll be able to make informed choices about that rather than spending unnecessary money or finding yourself painted into a corner, unable to deal with the situation you've got. I've deliberately avoided making this a specific portrait lighting course or glamour lighting course or still life lighting course, as in my experience there really are only a few differences from subject area to subject area. If you get those 4 characteristics locked in, you can light any situation. The only caveat being that in certain situations you may need a specific modifier or a specific tool to complete the exact look you're after. Going forward, I'd suggest you shoot a lot. Then really examine where the light falls in your shots and if it's doing what you want it to do. Start reverse engineering as much as you can, obviously initially on your own work, because it'll be pretty easy, you know what you did, but then look at other people's work as much as you can. Reverse engineer that, and wherever possible, dig out behind the scenes and set up shots online that will show you how people lit things. There's a wealth of information out there nowadays. You may want to start building your lighting kit, but I suggest you take that very slowly and very carefully. I know I've talked about kit in depth, that's only to explain how certain things work. What you don't want to do, as I know I've stressed in the past, is disappear down a rabbit hole of just throwing money at things. Start with something simple like a reflector, then possibly move on to a flash gun and some way of triggering it from off camera, then start to move into simple modifiers like an umbrella or maybe a softbox. Whatever you do, don't go out and spend a small fortune up front, because what you'll do is basically complicate your life, make things difficult, and introduce lots and lots of things that can go wrong, and you'll be more obsessed with trying to work out how all these different pieces work rather than concentrating on taking a decent shot. Keep your eyes peeled for more courses I've got in the pipeline. I've got all sorts of ideas tucked away up here ready to go. But above all, get out there, shoot some great pictures and enjoy yourself. So there you go. I hope the course has been helpful and beneficial and taught you lots about lighting. I think it pretty much covers all the basics you need to know in order to learn how to use light in photography. But of course, as with anything like this, it's really only the first stepping stone. These are the tools, the nuts and bolts, if you will, through which you can go on to create better and more interesting photographs. This whole course was originally behind a paywall, so I've just thought it made more sense these days to put it out on YouTube for free. Please subscribe to the channel. Obviously that sort of thing all helps. Hit like if you like what you're seeing. If you've got any questions, hit me up in the comments below or try and track my email address down. It shouldn't be too hard to find. And I look forward to seeing you again soon.